Welcome to the Imagine Your Future podcast. I'm Steve Hall, your host for this episode, and Karen Collyer is once again sitting in the co-host chair. I've been working in the technology space for over 30 years, 15 of those years with ISG, where I've supported some of the largest enterprises in the world on their digital journeys. Within ISG, I've led our applications business, manufacturing, media, and entertainment business, and now I lead our European business. Our aim with this podcast is to inform, educate, and engage our listeners on technology and digital related topics. We're lucky to have a great lineup of senior execs and thought leaders from various industries. So please subscribe and stay tuned to our social for more great content. So, hey, Karen, how are you today?
I am well, Steve. How are you?
I am doing great. I think we've got an exciting venture today. So you want to introduce?
Sure. Like you, I've worked in the tech space for about, 25-ish years and have had roles that span the gamut of global product management to program management to software design and implementation. And in one of my previous work lives to ISG, I had the extreme good fortune to work with Elizabeth E.C. Caley, the co-founder and co-CEO of Poppy. Elizabeth has agreed to sit down with us today to tell us all about her latest venture in the tech space. So welcome, EC. I am so honored to have you on the pod.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Okay, internally, I've been talking up this episode for a few weeks, so no pressure. My colleagues have lots of questions about Poppy. But before we get to the product, can you give us an overview of your journey in tech? Where did you start? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. My starting with an economics and business degree means you have to become a consultant, right? When you graduate. So that's actually when I met Karen, starting working together just after I graduated from university in Montreal. And then for the first decade of my career, I instantly gravitated to solving business problems that had to involve both people and technology. So I knew myself well enough that being a software engineer and writing code every day was going to be just a little bit too one-dimensional for me. And on the flip side, solving only people problems in a management role would also probably not satisfy me over time. So leading product teams where you had to do both of those things simultaneously, those on the strategy and execution side for technology companies turned out to be the perfect blend. So I did that for very large organizations like Microsoft, for mid-sized companies, and over time really gravitated to leadership roles at fast-growing, fast-moving, smaller teams and companies, where every single thing you do could make a huge difference on setting a company up for success down the road. And then over the last decade, I've been focused on making a positive impact at scale along with what I do. And that's, I think, the most promising way to do that is to bring innovations out of the world of research, out of the world of academia and into the world. And I've been lucky to do that twice now. And that includes what I'm doing today with Poppy.
That is awesome, Elizabeth. Can you tell us a bit more about Poppy? I mean, when Karen pitched the idea, I was really surprised on how long Poppy has been around, that you really in the works before the pre-pandemic, but give us a sense of what Poppy really is.
Yeah, so at Poppy, essentially our goal is to make the invisible visible, which if you're every single place that people are spending time right now, if you're indoors, which we tend to be up to 90% of our time, you are sharing your space with millions of other organisms that you probably don't think about or didn't think about at least a year and a half ago. And those are viruses, those are bacteria, those are invisible molds, those are pests. And all of those, a big subset of those can have a huge impact on our health, as we've all really learned severely over the last 14 months around the world. And so we developed the first commercial pathogen sensing and security system back in middle of 2019 to understand and give visibility to and help people manage and deal with what's in their environment so they can help make indoor spaces safer.
How the heck did you guys come on this idea? And more importantly, how did you come onto it a year before really COVID took off? And it couldn't be better with the timing. So how did you guys come up with the idea?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a story there. My co-founder and co-CEO Sam Molyneux and I have been working together now about 6 years, and we were co-leading his company Meta, which is one of Canada's earliest machine learning companies, and my first go at bringing scientific research into the world. We ended up selling the company to Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Dr. Priscilla Chan, and their philanthropy called the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, based in Silicon Valley back in 2017. And when we led a large technology team there and built a whole bunch of, I think, pretty cool stuff for scientists in the world. And when we decided to leave and start another company together, we essentially sat down and researched a ton of different ideas before landing on Poppy. And what happened is it started with a really simple question. What would be possible if you could know about every single living thing that we share our spaces with? So flu virus in the air, if I knew there was salmonella on the cafeteria's counter at my work, if I knew there was an invisible mold in a bathroom, if I knew there were bed bugs in the hotel room I was about to check in on, what happens if the invisible could become visible? And before I leave the house, I might know what out there could affect my health. So in 2019, we started talking to cruise ships, to hotels, to hospitals, retirement homes, care facilities, food packaging companies, anywhere where they've had severe problems and don't have great ways of knowing this information on a regular basis. And we talked to everybody we possibly could and started building out our first Poppy device based on their feedback. And then the pandemic hit a few months later.
Give us a sense of how does the technology work? I mean, it's got to have huge ramifications on both the B2C side, the B2B side. But can you give us an idea of the underlying architecture and how the technology works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a combination of hardware, software, including some machine learning and a whole bunch of very cool biotechnology. But at the core of what we do in the system are hardware devices that we've developed that continuously sample from the air. And so I'll just take one specific example where, to cover an office space, say in a downtown high-rise building, which a lot of us have worked in many years, that kind of space, we would essentially go in and help divide up that space into multiple zones and put a Poppy device in the center of each one of those zones. And those are places where people tend to congregate in, the kitchenette or lunchroom, in the lobby, in an open floor plan seating area, et cetera. And those essentially capture, all day long, and we use what gets captured on these specialty devices to then basically break it down into its individual DNA components. And then we use software from there in order to understand those DNA sequences and match them against databases of all known organisms that scientists are contributing to every day around the world. So that's a process called shotgun sequencing. Not going to get too geeky here, but that basically allows us to use one test, one approach to basically find everything that has DNA and more organisms that have RNA as their living code. And then the whole thing that we learned is that it's incredibly important also to help organizations understand what to do when something's found in their environment, because this is information nobody's had before, not really, until somebody gets sick. And we want to help people understand what they can do and that there is something that needs to be addressed before anybody gets sick.
Oh my gosh, my head is swimming. I've got so many questions. It's so amazing. As Karen knows, I could geek out for another hour just on this. So give me, I guess I got a couple questions for it. Give me a sense of what the response has been in the market, first of all, to it. And maybe a bit of that is from ideation to product to really sort of the go-to-market strategy. Can you walk us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The response has been overwhelming, honestly. We haven't launched officially. We haven't really done any marketing except for a couple of social media posts. And we've been incredibly fortunate to a whole bunch of folks have found us, from, the world's largest airlines to European monarchy who want to secure their palaces to, a factory in Windsor and everything in between. So
your first one is sold to the Queen then.
there's lots of monarchies. Yeah, but
that's true.
Believe it or not, but people at everywhere who are responsible for spaces. So whether you're the CEO or the COO or head of facilities or environmental health and safety, if you're asking or expecting folks to come together in the same place and work again, there's a huge amount of responsibility that now people understand they have in order to make that a place where our collective health, everything's being done to protect our health as groups. And so we've had great inbound response. This is not our first rodeo as entrepreneurs, so we spent a huge amount of time before we built anything, wrote one line of code or one part of the hardware device, or picked up a pipette in the lab. We talked to as many people as we possibly could and really tested all of our assumptions. We wanted to make sure that we got something out there that people could actually try and then refine it and make it, more sophisticated and, cover more things, for example. So a really iterative approach to developing the product, and go-to-market is really starting to launch right now with our launch officially into the US. We've been serving folks coast to coast in Canada now for several months. And then it's all about growing from there.
Excellent. Are you going to have a consumer's launch and a business launch, or what's sort of the thought process there?
Yeah, actually, when we first started envisioning Poppy, we pictured a Poppy in every indoor space, including every living room or kitchen. That is not what we're focusing right now. We're focusing on businesses and organizations, like the types I've mentioned before. But we've been getting, again, inbound requests for, every bus in a public transportation system of a large city, in airplanes, schools, etc. I think we'll get to homes, but we've got a lot on our plate right now that we're going to be addressing first.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a problem out there that you couldn't see a Poppy everywhere as you start thinking through it. I mean, it's amazing going through this. Given that the launch is coming up, what was sort of the biggest lessons that you learned, if you think about sort of ideation to product design and where you are? What lessons can you share with us?
I think we had gone in with some assumptions that we really wanted to bang on with other people's opinions, not just our own. And so, as an example, before the pandemic hit, what we were starting to build with our engineering team was a device that could basically run on its own for 30 days or more without somebody needing to touch it or do anything. That is a longer, but currently part of our engineering path. And so we started to talk to potential customers. What happens if somebody needed to do something every day, like swap out a cartridge in a device? Would that be a deal breaker, or would that just be able to be incorporated into the routine of we change the toilet paper, we refill the toilet paper rolls, we fill up the soap dispensers, and we change out a cartridge, at least for the time being at the place we're at with the roadmap. And we were very pleasantly surprised that those sorts of things are perfectly acceptable to 99% of the organizations we talk to. So those are the kinds of lessons learned. We decided not to shy away from things that we thought would be hard for people to understand or hard for people to get behind, and really just go out there, talk about the end value, and then listen really, really carefully to how people are responding to it.
I want to shift gears a little bit, EC, and kind of go back to your journey. That got you to where you are today. I know because we have history together, and from things that I've read about you online when I've been keeping track of your career, that you are a role model for lots of younger women who have chosen the STEM path. So you might not have gone to school for STEM, but you are certainly on that path now. If you were to go back in your Wayback Machine and offer yourself some coaching and advice, what would it be? And is it a different message than what you tell young women now?
This is a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it, Karen. And you probably actually said something to me decades ago when we were working together, and I was new in the workplace. And I'm ashamed to say I've only sort of clued into this first point much too recently. But I feel like I've wasted a lot of time and energy over the years just not being more direct. Not rude, not inconsiderate, just saying what I think without a lot of fluff and saying what I think directly to avoid misunderstanding. And of course, looking back, I know this is probably likely wrapped up in being a young woman in tech without, an engineering or software background. Often the only woman in the room making big business decisions on behalf of a lot more technical people, which is often what you have to do in product roles. And so now when I get to spend time, for example, in a high school girls mentoring program, as part of something I spend my time on every month, what I usually say is what has worked for me over the years when it comes to, people who might find themselves in similar situations where they're not feeling like they're super well represented in the rooms they're in. One is there will always be somebody more technical or who thinks they're more technical than you. So know the tech well enough to discuss it, but you don't have to feel like you need to be an expert in everything in order to contribute your opinion. Two, there will likely be people who also know the business well. And so it's important to understand the trade-offs of different options that are being discussed, but you don't have to be the person in the room who knows the business the best. But three, most importantly, know more about the customers or the end users than other people in the room. And by spending time with them and learning how to learn well from other people, you're probably going to be the only person in most rooms who can bring all three of those things together. And that is a wonderful way, to have confidence and to have your voice, heard. It's not about coming in with the fancy degrees necessarily, but it's about being able to integrate all three of those modes of thinking.
I'm glad you said that because I also don't have a background in STEM, but here I am, 25 years plus in technology. And when I talk to young women, one of the things I say is it doesn't matter what your degree is. Can you communicate? Can you problem solve? Can you understand? Sure. We'd like more women to go into STEM, I think, and I encourage all young people that I've been talking to do that because really that's where the jobs are going to be, right? Yeah. But yeah, I 100% agree with you. It's the synthesis of those sort of three qualities that make people stand out. I think that was a good answer. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I think that's so cool because, as somebody that has a STEM degree and has spent a lot of my career, in coding and with those things, I think the three things that you said are spot on as really just great career advice, certainly for young women that are entering the field, but really anybody entering the field. Mm-hmm. If I think about my own journey and what got me to where I am today was exactly what you said. My ability to work across organizations, ability to really collaborate, never feeling like I had to be the smartest person in the room and never discounting anybody's opinion. Yes. So I think making sure that as leaders, we respect that, but as individuals, we really bring those traits. That's amazing. How does the people that you coach and mentor, and especially, young women that are entering it, how do they take that advice, and do they really get the importance of that? Because it's quite profound the way you said it, quite frankly.
Thank you. I'm always challenged, if I get to spend half an hour or a day having somebody shadow me while I'm doing mentoring for other science-based startups through a program called CDL or Creative Destruction Lab. They'll often pair me up with and other mentors up with a girl in high school from any kind of background. Could be focusing on arts. I have flute players. I have people who, girls at the age of 14 who have built their own AI models. Like, it's just a wonderful range. And I feel like throughout a course of day, while I'm there with me, while I'm with maybe 10 other founders or scientists who want to start companies, I don't want to use the word deprogrammed, but I'm going to. I think they start to really see the possibilities. They start to see that, the folks who are really starting to make a huge difference, even at an early stage, compared to what we're used to. So, they might have just finished their PhD and they've come through some innovation in their PhD and now they come through a program like CDL to figure out if they can make a company out of it. I have high school girls who just basically say, I never knew that was possible. I've been told so many times that I have to go into engineering or I have to go into, pick STEM degree in order to do any of this. And of course, Karen, you want to encourage it because the background is wonderful. But having somebody who grew up and loves music and decides to start a cool company that helps the world, it's one of the most rewarding things that I get to do.
That is so awesome. Karen, we could have a whole podcast just on inspiring, because now I'm just as excited on the product as I am you as a person, Elizabeth. So thank you for that. Let me get to the money side of the business, right?
Yeah.
What's your sense? How do you sort of see going to market? What's sort of your buying journey, and how not only do you get the word out, but what's sort of your plan to start addressing enterprise clients? How do you see the next stage of growth going forward?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. We're really lucky that we now have great reference customers in a number of industries, and we've learned a ton through their projects and their deployments. We're typically working with the CEO and her team. So facilities management, EHS, also HR and marketing are often closely involved. And what we do is typically have like a 30-minute conversation and Q&A over Zoom, explain what we're doing and how people have found that valuable, how organizations tend to respond, how it affects the staff, how it affects recruiting and gives boost to recruiting as well, which a lot of organizations are struggling with right now. And then we get the organization's floor plans, and our engineers and biologists, virologists, do an initial system design the next day or two and suggest where poppy devices should go based on how we understand a space is being used, and then have a second call, review our assumptions together, adjust the plan, and then decide to scope and do a rollout, set a potential start date. So then when an organization says go, even a large organization, we can be up and running and in a space within 48 hours. And they get to start to see this data that they've never had before. The actual sales process and rollout, we very deliberately designed it to be super straightforward and streamlined, knowing that this is not a software solution. There's hardware components to it as well, and obviously the science behind it. But we want it to feel as much as possible like I'm going and I'm, buying some licenses of, I don't know, pick your favorite SaaS software. So we sell it as a subscription. There's no upfront investment. There's no CapEx required. We continue to upgrade the hardware devices, as we come up with new generations at no cost to the customer. And, essentially every month they get the bill, and, every day or however they decide on the frequency side they want to run the system for, they get an update in the results in their app. And then, we've got essentially a support team, but they're not just a tech support team; they're a pathogen support team, so to speak, in case something happens and they want help on how to deal with it and how to communicate it.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
I can see them looking at the results and saying, "Oh crap, what do we do now?" Right?
Yes, and that was an early learning from our customers.
Yeah, we should. It's so interesting because, for the listeners, everybody knows ISG. We work with so many different systems integrators and product firms. But one of the key things right now is clearly, workforce safety and health and safety just across the board, going back into the workplace. I suspect many of our listeners are writing this down right now because I think there's clearly a play for facilities management, organizations that manage large-scale facilities for clients to work with them to bring the technology in. And for SIs, quite frankly, that are moving into the workplace of the future where safety is so important, almost like ClearPass and some of the other technologies coming to bear,
Right.
where it could be part of a broader solution for them. So there's probably a lot of different angles to think about how to open up your sales channels. The problem is going to, not that it's a problem, but, making sure that you can handle the demand and everything else as you go forward.
I love scaling problems, so bring those on.
It's a great problem to have, isn't it? I agree with you. I never lose sleep over scaling problems.
No.
Very good.
Okay, Elizabeth, I've known you for a number of years, and one of the things that I admire about you most is that you're always ahead of the curve. Even when we were doing, the crazy boring job of what we did back at the beginning, you were way ahead of everybody else. You were always looking at how can I automate this? How can I make this more efficient? I want you to put on your futurist hat.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me what you think the next big trend in tech is going to be and kind of what the signals are that you're seeing already that support that.
Ooh. Can I mention 3 things? Do we have enough time?
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
I know you cover at least 2 of them at ISG, and I know they have been topics of conversation for you. I've been incredibly lucky to get sneak peeks at this next wave of science-based startups through the program I mentioned earlier. And so I think over the last 5 years, I've been able to mentor about 150 different science-based startups.
Wow.
And, blockchain, city-based stuff, there's just AI, there's so much good stuff going on. I think the ones that excite me the most now for potential are quantum computing. There's a great crop of quantum computing companies, that's gone through the period of hype and then the trough of disillusionment we all know well. I think quantum computing is just about to come of age, just in time to help with fundamental cybersecurity issues, most of all, which I know you guys cover at ISG, and other cool things like, developing new materials with a zillion potential applications. So quantum for me is big. Space tech is probably next on my list. The amazing Chris Hadfield is part of the program, a CDL Space Stream. And I don't know if everybody realizes just how much that's changed over the last, I would even say 3 years. But space is now accessible to pretty much any organization. There were 30 plus private launches last year. It costs about $2,000 to get a kilogram into space. So if you want to design your own nano satellite or CubeSat, basically you can do it. And part of the cool stuff that's happened there, if you think of the shipping containers that we all know, by standardizing the size of those, that basically transformed global supply chains. And now that's happened at a much smaller scale, of course. But a defined size and shape for payloads have basically mean that you can basically shop around if you have a satellite or something else that you want to launch into space. And that's making a huge difference in communications, scanning the Earth for landmines, understanding the impact of climate, climate change and deforestation, understanding global migration patterns. Space tech is just, again, on the tipping point. And then I know, again, a topic you cover a lot is on the health tech side. Obviously, the last year has been incredible. Biosensors, digital health, personal medicine. And most notably here in my mind is mRNA, which we all know a lot about thanks to the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. Derek Rossi, who's the co-founder of Moderna, was on a call I was on the other day. He's probably now the richest biologist on the planet. And the pipeline that is coming after the Moderna COVID vaccine, both of vaccines and therapeutics based on the same underlying breakthroughs of mRNA, is just incredible. So imagine an HIV vaccine shortly. Imagine Zika, influenza, being able to treat autoimmune disorders, heart failure. I can barely wrap my head around what the next 2 decades in health are going to be for all of us. That's my list.
That's a brilliant list. I know you're working with the Zuckerberg Foundation. I know the Gates Foundation is deep into this as well. And your 3 are clearly at the top of so many lists on making the world and our planet a safer place and a better place. Brilliant list. I'm a space geek as well, and I was sitting here with a big silly grin as you were talking about space tech. That's how I started my career. So, and you're absolutely right. It could change it the same way the logistics were transformed. So with that, EC, I think the future is a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining the podcast, Imagine Your Future. You really give our listeners a lot to ponder. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And again, thank you for inviting me, Karen. It was so nice to catch up. And Stephen, I really appreciate all the work you're doing and getting cool ideas out there.
Very cool. Karen, any closing remarks from you?
Just the usual reminder. So if you like what you heard today, you can hear more by accessing the podcast via our website. That's www.isg-1, spelled one.com. Or you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, take the time to rate us. We'd appreciate the feedback. Thanks again to EC. Thanks for listening. And until next time.